I was never the kind of girl who drew attention to herself. I stayed late, perfected renderings that maybe 3 people would glance at, and kept my head down in the gleaming halls of Sterling Properties. Architecture was supposed to be my safe bet, the practical choice, the one that paid off student loans and made my parents proud. Music, singing, those were dreams I'd folded up and tucked away like childhood drawings you can't quite throw out. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when my phone rang. Diana's name flashed across the screen, and my stomach dropped before I even answered. She never called this late unless something was wrong. Taylor. Her voice was tight, controlled in that way that meant she was barely holding it together. The doctors called. Abuela's getting worse. They're saying weeks, maybe days, before she stops recognizing us completely. I pressed my palm against my desk, the smooth laminate cool under my fingers. Around me, Sterling Properties' open-concept floor stretched empty and dark, just my small pool of lamplight in an ocean of shadows. How bad? She didn't know my name today. She kept calling me Mama, asking where her children were. Diana's breath hitched. Taylor, she's disappearing. And we're 3 states away, drowning in shifts and debts and excuses. After we hung up, I sat there in the silence, staring at architectural plans that suddenly felt meaningless. Lines on paper. Luxury condos for people who'd never struggled to afford their grandmother's care facility. My throat burned with tears I couldn't shed. Not here, not in this building where emotions were as out of place as sneakers with a suit. Then I remembered the lullaby. Duerme mi nina, duerme mi sol. The words came back like muscle memory, like Rose's weathered hands braiding my hair, her voice wrapping around me in Spanish syllables that meant home. I opened my voice memo app, pressed record, and just let it out. My voice cracked on the second verse, broke completely on the third. I sang through tears, my Spanish rough around the edges from years of disuse, but still there, still real. When I finished, I sat there holding my phone like it contained something precious. Diana needed to hear this. She needed to remember that Abuela wasn't gone yet, that some part of her still existed in the songs she'd taught us. I opened Airdrop, my eyes blurred with tears. The screen swam. I saw Diana and Sterling right next to each other in the list of nearby devices. My thumb was moving before my brain caught up. Tap. Send. Delivered. 3 seconds passed before I registered what I'd done. Sterling. Dominic Sterling. My boss. The CEO. The man who'd maybe spoken 10 words directly to me in 4 months. All of them curt and professional. The Ice King, they called him. The youngest billionaire in luxury real estate, who ran his empire with precision and zero tolerance for anything that wasn't absolutely perfect. And I just sent him a voice memo of me crying and singing in Spanish. My hands started shaking. I tried to unsend it, delete it, make it disappear, but Airdrop doesn't work that way. It was out there. He had it. In 3 seconds, I'd gone from invisible junior architect to the girl who sent her CEO an emotional breakdown set to music. I should have packed my desk right then, started drafting my resignation. But I just sat there, frozen, until my phone rang. The screen lit up, Dominic Sterling. My heart stopped, then started again, so loud I could hear blood rushing in my ears. With trembling fingers, I answered. Hello. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Silence. Long enough that I wondered if he'd called by mistake, if I should hang up and pretend this entire night never happened. Then I heard him breathe, shaky and uneven. Where did you learn that song? His voice wasn't what I expected. Not cold, not angry. It was raw, stripped of the carefully controlled tone I'd heard in presentations and boardrooms. He sounded like someone who'd just seen a ghost. It's just a lullaby. My grandmother taught me. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. It was an accident. I meant to send it to my sister. I wasn't. Don't apologize. He cut me off. Another pause, and I could hear something in the background, like he was moving. What's your grandmother's name? Rosa. Rosa Torres. I didn't understand why he was asking, why he hadn't hung up or told me to report to HR in the morning. And she taught you duerme mi nina. Yes. My confusion must have bled into that single word. He was quiet for so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. Then, meet me on the 47th floor. Now, Mr. Sterling, it's almost midnight. I know what time it is, Miss Torres. 47th floor. I'll be waiting. The line went dead. The executive elevator was the kind of quiet that made you aware of your own breathing. I watched the numbers climb, 32, 38, 44, and tried to prepare myself for termination. Maybe he'd brought me up here to fire me privately, save me the humiliation of a public escort from the building. At least I'd spare my parents the whole story. The doors opened to soft lighting and minimalist design. Everything up here was glass and steel and money, the kind of space that reminded you exactly how far you were from belonging. Dominic Sterling's assistant desk sat empty, and beyond it, his office door stood ajar. I knocked anyway. Waited. When no answer came, I pushed the door open. He stood with his back to me, hands in his pockets, staring out floor-to-ceiling windows at the city sprawled below like scattered diamonds. The skyline glittered, indifferent to whatever small human drama was unfolding 47 stories up. Mr. Sterling? He turned slowly, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his face. His jaw was tight, his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that had dissected quarterly reports and demolished unprepared executives, looked haunted. There was no other word for it. Sit. He gestured to the chairs near the window. Not an invitation, a command, but a gentle one. I sat on the edge of leather that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and waited. He moved to the chair across from me, close enough that I could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. My mother's name was Elena, he said finally. Elena Reyes, before she married my father and became Elena Sterling. She was from a working-class Mexican family. Her parents owned a small grocery store in the Mission District. My father's family never let her forget she wasn't one of them. I stayed very still, afraid that any movement might break whatever spell was allowing him to tell me this. She sang to me every night. That exact song. Duerme mi nina, duerme mi sol, duerme pedazo de mi corazón. His pronunciation was rusty but precise, like he'd practiced the words in secret. When I was 10, she died. An aneurysm. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. And my father, he stopped, jaw working. My father decided the best way to help me move on was to erase her. All of her. Photos, music, language. Spanish wasn't allowed in our house anymore. I wasn't allowed to talk about her. It was like she'd never existed. I started, but he held up a hand. I haven't heard that song in 20 years. I thought I'd forgotten it. Convinced myself I had. He looked directly at me then, and the intensity in his gaze made me feel exposed. But I didn't forget. The second your voice came through my phone, I knew every word, every note, and I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened. I lost my abuelo 2 years ago. Now Rosa, my grandmother, she's disappearing into dementia. Most days she doesn't know where she is, who we are. But sometimes, when we sing to her, she remembers. The songs are the last thing holding her here. You sound like you're drowning, he said quietly. I am. I left her to come here, to build this career, and now she's slipping away and I'm 3 states away designing luxury condos for people who'll never know what it's like to choose between visiting your dying grandmother and keeping your job. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. I never talked like this at work, never let anyone see past the professional mask. But something about this moment, the late hour, his confession, the way he was looking at me like he actually saw me, made the walls crumble. I hide everything here, I continued. My music, my family, the fact that I feel like an imposter every single day. I pulled my hair back, dressed in neutral colors, made myself smaller so I'd fit. And I still don't belong. You belong, Dominic said, and the certainty in his voice startled me. You don't hide because you don't belong. You hide because you're afraid of what happens when people see all of you. I know. I've been doing it for 20 years. We sat there in silence, 2 strangers connected by grief and a lullaby that had traveled across generations to crack us both open. Would you sing it again? His voice was barely above a whisper. Here, just once. I need to hear it when I'm ready. My hands trembled in my lap. This was my CEO, the most powerful man in the building, asking me to sing a lullaby in his office at midnight. Every professional instinct screamed that this was wrong, inappropriate, dangerous. But when I looked at him, I didn't see Dominic Sterling, billionaire. I saw a 10-year-old boy who'd lost his mother and spent 20 years pretending he didn't remember her voice. So I sang, softly at first, then stronger, letting my voice fill the space between us with Spanish syllables that meant comfort and home and love that transcends loss. I sang for Rosa, slipping away in her facility. For Elena, erased but not forgotten. For Dominic, who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. When I finished, I opened my eyes and found him staring at me with an expression I couldn't name. Grief, yes, but something else too. Something that made my pulse quicken. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. I forgot what it sounded like to remember her. We stayed there until after 2 in the morning, talking about mothers and grandmothers, about cultural erasure and imposter syndrome, about all the parts of ourselves we'd learned to hide. And when I finally left his office, nothing between us looked the same. I told myself things would go back to normal. That late-night conversation was a bubble, separate from our real lives. On Wednesday morning, I'd walk into Sterling Properties and be invisible again. Except Dominic Sterling didn't let me disappear. It started small. A nod when he passed my desk. His eyes finding mine during the morning briefing. Nothing overt enough for anyone else to notice, but I noticed. I felt it like electricity under my skin. Thursday afternoon, the senior architects presented concepts for the Riverside luxury development. Gerald Patterson, 20 years my senior, with credentials from Princeton and connections that spanned 3 continents, led the presentation. His vision was exactly what the board expected: glass towers, modern minimalism, the kind of sleek design that erased history in favor of profit. I sat in the back of the conference room, taking notes no one would read. My own concepts sat in a folder on my laptop, the ones that incorporated the site's historic Spanish colonial elements, that honored what had been there before. But junior architects didn't present to the board. We observed. We learned. We stayed quiet. Gerald finished to polite applause. The board members nodded, already reaching for their phones. Then Dominic spoke. "Miss Torres." The room went silent. 20 heads turned toward me. "Sir." My voice came out steady, but my heart slammed against my ribs. "You've been working on the Riverside project as well. I'd like to hear your concepts." Gerald's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Dominic, I don't think we need to take up the board's time with preliminary." "I wasn't asking your permission, Gerald." Dominic's tone stayed polite, but there was steel underneath. His eyes were on me. "Miss Torres." I stood on legs that felt like water. Every instinct screamed at me to defer, to make some excuse, to not draw this kind of attention. But then I remembered him in his office at midnight, remembering his mother through a song. I remembered his voice. "You hide because you're afraid of what happens when people see all of you." So I pulled up my presentation and began. The Riverside site has Spanish colonial architecture dating back to 1892. I started, my voice gaining strength. Rather than demolish it, I propose integrating the existing structures into a mixed-use development that honors the neighborhood's heritage while serving modern needs. Affordable housing units alongside luxury condos. Community spaces that reflect the cultural history of the area. Green spaces that reference the original Mission Gardens. I walked them through renderings, floor plans, historical research. I talked about architecture as cultural memory, about building spaces that welcomed everyone, not just the wealthy, about how luxury didn't have to mean erasure. When I finished, the room was quiet. Gerald looked like he'd swallowed something sour. But Dominic leaned forward, his eyes bright with something I couldn't name. "That's exactly what we're building," he said. "Miss Torres, your lead architect on Riverside, effective immediately." The room erupted. Board members exchanged glances. Gerald stammered protests about experience and precedent. But Dominic's gaze never left mine. "Your voice matters," he said, so quiet only I could hear. "Stop hiding it." After the meeting, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You were right. It does feel like the first real thing I've felt in years. DS." I stared at those words, at the initials that made my stomach flip. Around me, colleagues whispered and speculated. In her corner office, Victoria Blackwell watched through glass walls, her expression calculating. And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. I just didn't know how much. The site visit was scheduled for Friday. Just me and Dominic, 2 hours north to see the property I'd be redesigning. When his assistant emailed the details, my stomach dropped. 2 hours alone in a car with him. No buffer. No escape. He picked me up at 7 in the morning, driving himself in a black Mercedes that probably cost more than my college education. I slid into the passenger seat, hyper-aware of the confined space, the scent of his cologne, the way his hands looked on the steering wheel. Coffee. He held out a cup from the holder between us. Thank you. I took it, our fingers brushing. The touch sent electricity up my arm. For the first 30 minutes, we talked about the project. Safe territory, architectural surveys, zoning requirements, construction timelines. But somewhere around mile 40, the conversation shifted. Why architecture, he asked. You mentioned wanting to sing. I watched the landscape blur past. My parents sacrificed everything so Diana and I could have opportunities they never did. My father still works 60-hour weeks at their restaurant. Architecture felt like honoring that sacrifice. Singing felt like throwing it away. And now I design buildings for people who'll never know what sacrifice looks like. The bitterness surprised me. I'm good at it. But sometimes I wonder if being good at something is enough reason to keep doing it. He was quiet for a long moment. I built Sterling Properties because it was expected. My father handed me the empire, and I made it bigger, better, more profitable. But I never asked myself why. I just knew that if I stopped moving, stopped building, I'd have to face everything I'd buried. And now, I echoed his question back to him. His hands tightened on the wheel. Now I'm starting to think I buried the wrong things. The property took my breath away. The main house stood 3 stories tall, Spanish colonial architecture with terracotta tiles and wrought iron balconies. Courtyards opened to overgrown gardens where fountains had long since run dry. It was crumbling and magnificent, exactly like the stories Rosa used to tell about her childhood home in Guadalajara. I walked through rooms with high ceilings and arched doorways, my fingers trailing along sun-warmed stucco. Without thinking, I started humming, then singing, soft and low, a different song Rosa had taught me about coming home. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You do that without realizing, Dominic said behind me. I spun around, caught. He stood in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun, and the expression on his face made my heart stutter. He wasn't looking at the architecture. He was looking at me like I was something rare and breakable and precious. Do what? Disappear into yourself. Into the music. He stepped closer. It's like watching you become fully real for the first time. The air between us thickened. I should have stepped back, made a joke, done something to break the tension. Instead, I stayed frozen as he closed the distance. This is a mistake, he said, but he didn't stop moving. Then why does it feel like the first real thing I've felt in years? The words came out barely above a whisper. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. For one suspended moment, I thought he'd kiss me. Wanted him to kiss me with an intensity that terrified me. Then his phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Dominic closed his eyes, jaw tight. I have to take this. He stepped away, and the spell broke. I walked outside into the courtyard, hands shaking, trying to remember how to breathe. On the drive back, neither of us mentioned what almost happened. But the silence felt louder than words, and when he dropped me off, his goodbye sounded like an apology. I tried to stay away. For 3 days, I kept my head down, worked from home when I could, avoided the executive floor. But Wednesday night, I had to finalize the Riverside renderings. The software I needed was only on my office computer. The building was empty by 9 p.m. I worked in my pool of lamplight, earbuds in, listening to the recordings I'd made of Rosa. Her voice, still strong in these older files, singing the songs that had raised me. I let the tears fall while I designed spaces meant to honor heritage, trying to hold on to her memory even as the real Rosa slipped away. I didn't hear him approach. Didn't know he was there until his reflection appeared in my monitor. I jumped, yanking out my earbuds. Mr. Sterling. I didn't know anyone else was here. Board meeting ran late. He looked exhausted, tie loosened, jacket over his arm. Then he noticed my face, the tears I hadn't bothered to hide. Are you okay? Just working. I reached to close the audio file. Is that her? He asked quietly. Your grandmother? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Please don't turn it off. So I didn't. We stood there in my small cubicle, listening to Rosa's voice fill the space between us, singing about home and love and memory. When the recording ended, Dominic sat on the edge of my desk. My father hired people to pack up my mother's things the day after her funeral, he said. By the time I came home from school, it was like she'd never existed. Her clothes, her books, her music. All of it gone. He thought he was helping me move on. But you can't move on from something if you're not allowed to remember it happened. You remember, I said. You remembered the song. Because of you. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw everything he'd been holding back. For 20 years, I convinced myself that forgetting was the same as healing. That if I built something big enough, controlled enough, I could fill the space she left. But it didn't work. And then you sent me that voice message, and everything I'd buried came back all at once. I'm sorry. Don't be. He reached out, took my hand. The touch felt like coming home. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Not just the memory of my mother, but the ability to feel anything at all. I stood, and somehow we were inches apart. Dominic, tell me to stop, he said. Tell me this is wrong, that you don't feel this too, and I'll walk away. I'll keep things professional. But if you don't say it now. I kissed him, rose up on my toes and pressed my mouth to his, and for a moment he froze. Then his arms came around me, pulling me close, and he kissed me back like a drowning man breaking the surface. It wasn't gentle. It was 20 years of buried grief and longing, desperation and relief, and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, he pressed his forehead to mine. This changes everything. I know, I whispered. And I did. Because once you let someone see all of you, every hidden part, every buried wound, there's no going back to who you were before. We were careful. No touching at work, no lingering glances in meetings. But at night, we existed in our own world. He'd text at 10 p.m., still awake? And I'd find myself in his car, driving to his penthouse where we could be ourselves without titles or hierarchies. He brought takeout from my parents' restaurant, having researched and driven an hour out of his way. We ate on his balcony overlooking the city, and I told him stories about growing up in the kitchen, about Rosa teaching me to make tamales, about feeling caught between two worlds that both claimed me, but neither fully accepted. Show me, he said one night. Show you what? Everything you've hidden. The parts you think don't belong in boardrooms. So I sang for him. Not the lullabies, but the songs Rosa sang while cooking, the ones about heartbreak and joy and revolution. I sang until my voice was raw, and he listened like every note mattered. Then he showed me his hidden thing, a box he'd kept in the back of his closet for 20 years. Inside were photos of Elena, her smile bright and unguarded, a rosary with worn beads, and a cassette tape labeled in faded ink, Elena's songs. I've never played it, he admitted. I was afraid it would hurt too much. I held his hand as we listened. Elena's voice filled the room, singing in Spanish, and Dominic cried for the first time since he was 10. I held him through it, this powerful man who'd finally let his armor crack. At work, we maintained distance. But people noticed things. The way Dominic's decisions increasingly favored my projects. How he left the office at reasonable hours for the first time in years. The energy that shifted when we were in the same room. Victoria noticed most of all. I'd catch her watching us during meetings, her expression calculating. She started asking pointed questions about my rapid advancement, about whether I felt supported by leadership. I kept my answers vague, but I knew she was building something. Marcus Reed cornered Dominic in the parking garage one evening. I wasn't there, but Dominic told me about it later. I'm not judging you, Marcus had said, but I'm not blind either. And if I can see it, others will too. If you care about her, protect her. Because this stays hidden, or it destroys you both. Diana called me on a Sunday morning, video chat, and knew immediately something had changed. You're glowing, she said. Please tell me this isn't what I think it is. I couldn't lie to her. It's him. Dominic. Taylor. Her voice went sharp with fear. He's your boss. He's a billionaire. The power imbalance alone. It's not like that. You don't understand. He sees me. All of me. The parts I've spent years hiding. That's what makes it dangerous, she said quietly. Because when it ends, and it will end, you'll have given him everything. And he'll still be a billionaire CEO, and you'll still be a junior architect who everyone will say slept her way up. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't shake the fear that she might be right. Still, when Dominic texted that night, I went to him. Because for the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't have to choose between different versions of myself. With him, I could be everything at once. I just didn't see the walls closing in. Didn't notice Victoria documenting every interaction, every late-night office visit, every moment when our professional distance slipped. The trap was already set. We just hadn't sprung it yet. Thursday morning, I walked into Sterling Properties and knew immediately something was wrong. Conversation stopped when I passed. Eyes tracked me with a mixture of pity and judgment. My stomach twisted. Marcus found me before I reached my desk. His face was grim. Conference room 3. Now, the executive team sat around the table like a firing squad. Marcus gestured to a chair. I sat, hands clasped to stop them shaking. An email was sent to the board last night. Marcus said quietly. Anonymous. It contained surveillance photos of you and Dominic, leaving his penthouse, in the parking garage, working late in your office. The floor dropped out from under me. The email alleges favoritism, professional misconduct, and he paused, jaw tight. It accuses you of advancing your career through inappropriate means. Where's Dominic? My voice came out steady somehow. Board meeting. He doesn't know yet. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her expression professionally sympathetic in a way that made my skin crawl. Taylor, I want you to know this is purely procedural. But given the allegations, we need to place you on administrative leave while we investigate. You did this. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Her smile didn't waver. I understand you're upset, but I think it's best if you gather your things. Security will escort you out. The walk through the office felt like a death march. Colleagues I'd worked beside for months stared, whispered, judged. Everything I'd built, every project I'd earned, suddenly suspect. Tainted. I'd become exactly what Diana feared, the girl who slept her way up. Dominic called 16 times before I finally answered. I was home, curled on my couch, staring at nothing. Where are you? His voice was ragged. I'm coming to you. Don't. Taylor. They'll use it against me. Against us. Every move you make to defend me just proves their point. But he came anyway. Stood in my apartment looking like he'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. I can fix this, he said. I'll make a statement. Tell them the truth. That our relationship began after your work proved its merit. That you earned every opportunity. And they'll say you're biased. That you're protecting me because we're involved. Don't you see? If you defend me, you prove the allegations. If you don't, I lose everything anyway. Tears burn my eyes. There's no way out of this that doesn't destroy one of us. Then we fight together. You're a billionaire CEO. I'm a junior architect. We were never fighting from the same position. I wiped my eyes. They'll never believe this was real. They'll only see what Victoria wants them to see. He pulled me close, and I let myself break in his arms. Because by morning, everything would be different. Victoria had called an emergency board review meeting. The media was already picking up the story. And I knew, with sickening certainty, that this was the beginning of the end. I wasn't supposed to attend the board meeting, but I showed up anyway, wearing my best suit like armor, chin high. The boardroom fell silent when I walked in. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Dominic half rose from his seat, but I shook my head. I have something to say. My voice didn't shake. And you're going to listen. I stood at the head of the table and told the truth. Yes, Dominic and I were in a relationship. Yes, it complicated things. But I detailed every project I'd worked on, every accomplishment that was mine alone, every late night and early morning I'd spent earning my place. My relationship with Dominic began after my work proved its value. But I understand that perception matters as much as truth. So I'm resigning. Not because I believe I did anything wrong, but because I won't be the reason he loses the company his mother's memory helped him build. I looked directly at the board. Don't ever question whether I earned my place. I did, but I won't let my presence here destroy something bigger than myself. The room was silent. Then Victoria smiled. I appreciate your candor, Miss Torres, but I think we need to address the larger issue. She turned to the board. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Dominic Sterling's leadership. His judgment has been compromised. He's created liability for this company, and I move that he be removed as CEO. The room erupted. Half the board looked shocked. The other half looked like they'd been waiting for this. Marcus stood. You're making a mistake, Victoria. Dominic built this company into what it is today. Through nepotism and now through inappropriate relationships that create legal exposure. Victoria cut him off. The board began to debate. Dominic sat silent, jaw clenched, watching me like I was the only person in the room. Then Marcus said something that changed everything. Elena taught you to be brave. His voice rang out over the arguments. Your mother, Dominic. The woman you spent 20 years trying to forget. If you let Taylor walk out of here believing she has to sacrifice herself to save you, then you've learned nothing. Elena taught you that some things matter more than power. Show us you remember. Dominic looked at Marcus, then at me. Then he stood. I'm stepping down as CEO. The room went completely silent. Not as punishment, he continued. As evolution. I built this company as armor against feeling anything. It was never meant to be my identity. If staying in this role means losing the one person who taught me what it means to be human again, then this company isn't worth leading. He looked directly at Victoria. You wanted me to fight for power, but I'm choosing something better. Then he walked out of the boardroom, past Victoria's stunned face, past the board members scrambling to process what had happened. He stopped beside me, took my hand. Come with me. You just gave up everything, I whispered. No, he said. I just figured out what everything really means. We walked out of Sterling Properties together, and behind us, I heard Victoria's carefully constructed plan collapse into chaos. 3 months felt like another lifetime. I went home, not to my apartment, but home. To my parents' restaurant that smelled like cilantro and memories. To Rose's bedside, where I sang every day, recording every moment of clarity. To the parts of myself I tried to leave behind. Diana found me crying one night. I lost everything. No, she said firmly. You lost a job. You found yourself. She was right. Without the pressure of proving I belonged in corporate spaces, I started singing again. Really singing. At a local open mic night, I performed in Spanish and English, my voice raw with everything I'd survived. Someone recorded it, posted it online. By morning, it had 10,000 views. By the end of the week, 500,000. People called it authentic, powerful, a voice that carried grief and hope in equal measure. Meanwhile, Dominic had disappeared from public life. Marcus texted occasionally with updates. Dominic liquidated his stake in Sterling Properties. He was working with nonprofit developers on affordable housing projects, learning Spanish, visiting the neighborhood where Elena grew up. But he never contacted me directly, and I told myself that was right. We'd made our choices. We were healing separately. Then Diana called on a Tuesday evening. Someone's here asking for you. I walked into my parents' dining room and stopped breathing. Dominic stood by a table, wearing jeans and a navy sweater I'd never seen before. He looked different, softer, present. He held a rolled set of architectural plans. My father stood with arms crossed, protective. My mother watched with cautious curiosity. Diana hovered nearby like a guard dog. Taylor. His voice was steady, but his eyes held uncertainty. I want to show you something, but only if you want to see it. You've been gone for 3 months. The words came out sharper than I intended. I know. I needed to figure out who I was without the title, without the armor. I needed to make sure that when I came back to you, I was coming as myself, not as someone you'd have to sacrifice for. He unrolled the plans on a nearby table. I stepped closer despite myself. It was the historic estate, our estate, but the designs showed something completely different from luxury condos. A community cultural center, he said. Performance space, artist residencies, architecture that honors heritage instead of erasing it. These are your concepts, your vision, and I want you to lead it. Not as my employee, as my partner. Equal stake, equal say, your name on everything. I stared at the plans, at the spaces designed for people like me, like Rosa, like Elena. Spaces that said you belong exactly as you are. Why? I whispered. Because you taught me what my mother tried to show me. That culture isn't weakness. That emotion isn't liability. That the only thing worth building is something that makes space for everyone. He stepped closer. I want to build this with you. If you'll have me. Not as your boss. Just as me. Behind him, my mother was crying. Diana looked torn between suspicion and hope. My father's arms had uncrossed slightly. I looked at the plans. At this man who'd restructured his entire life around a lesson about what really mattered. At the possibility of creating something that honored every hidden part of myself. When do we start? I asked. His smile broke like sunlight. Whenever you're ready. This time, when he reached for my hand, there was nothing to hide from. Just two people who'd found each other in grief and decided to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. He took me to see it the next morning. The historic estate, our estate, standing proud against the sunrise. But when we walked through those Spanish colonial archways, I saw it transformed. Scaffolding outlined new spaces. Construction plans marked walls that would become performance halls, studios, gathering places. You bought it, I whispered. We're buying it, he corrected. Equal partnership means equal investment. I'm just starting with better credit. I walked through rooms we'd explored months ago, but this time I saw the future. A music hall with acoustics designed for intimate performances. Workshop spaces where artists could create without worrying about rent. Housing for artists and residents who needed time and space to find their voices. Every design choice honored what had been there before while making room for what could be. It was everything I dreamed architecture could be and never thought I'd get to build. "This is your vision," Dominic said, watching me take it all in. I just made sure the plans could actually happen. "Why?" I turned to face him. "You could have built anything. Gone anywhere. Why this?" "Because my mother spent her whole life being told she didn't belong in my father's world. And I spent 20 years believing the same thing. That emotion was weakness. That culture was something to overcome, not celebrate." He stepped closer. "You taught me that the only empire worth building is one that makes space for everyone's story. Including mine. Including hers." I looked at the plans again, seeing Rosa's influence in every curve and corner. Seeing Elena in the careful preservation of heritage. Seeing all the versions of ourselves we'd hidden, finally given space to exist. "When do we start?" I asked. His smile was answer enough. 6 months later, I stood backstage at the grand opening, hands shaking. The restored hall buzzed with voices, community members, artists, donors, press. Diana stood beside me, adjusting my dress for the 3rd time. "You've got this," she said. "Just sing like you did at that open mic. Like nobody's watching. Except everyone's watching. Then sing for the people who matter." She squeezed my hand. "Sing for Rosa. For Elena. For that girl who thought she had to choose between who she was and who she wanted to be." The lights dimmed. I walked onto that stage, and the restored hall stretched before me like possibility made physical. In the front rows, I saw my parents, crying before I'd even opened my mouth. Marcus and his family, beaming. Even Victoria had come, though she sat in the back, her expression unreadable. And Rosa, Diana had brought her in a wheelchair, wrapped in blankets. Her eyes were cloudy with confusion most days. But tonight, right now, she looked at me and smiled. I began to sing. Not in English. Not trying to make it palatable or professional. I sang in Spanish, the songs Rosa taught me, the ones Elena sang to Dominic. I sang about coming home, about the bridges we build between worlds, about love that transcends loss. Halfway through, I heard it. A voice joining mine from the front row. Thin and wavering but sure. Rosa singing along. Remembering. I almost stopped, overwhelmed. But I kept going, singing with my grandmother one last time, knowing this moment of clarity was a gift. When I finished, the silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the room erupted. But I only cared about one person. Dominic wasn't in the front row where I'd expected. He stood in the back, near the doors, watching me with an expression that said everything words couldn't. After the speeches and congratulations and 100 conversations with people who wanted to know our story, I found him outside. The terrace overlooked gardens we'd restored, lit by string lights that turned everything golden. "You weren't sitting up front," I said. "I didn't need to be." He turned to me. "I'm not trying to own your light anymore. Just grateful I get to witness it." I looked at this man who'd rebuilt his entire life around a lesson about what truly mattered. Who'd chosen vulnerability over control, community over empire, love over power. "I still can't believe you built this." He took my hand, laced our fingers together. "We built this. That's the difference. You don't build something meaningful alone. You need someone to share the vision. Someone who sees you completely and stays anyway." Is that what you see? All of me. Every part. The architect and the singer. The professional and the daughter. The woman who's terrified of failing and brave enough to try anyway. He pulled me closer. "And I'm here for all of it." I kissed him then, under stars that had witnessed our journey from accidental connection to intentional creation. This time, there was nothing to hide from. No power imbalance to navigate. No scandal waiting to expose us. Just 2 people who'd found each other in grief and built something beautiful from the broken pieces. Who'd learned that the most powerful thing you can do isn't control your story, but live it authentically. Who'd discovered that sometimes the wrong message becomes the right beginning. And sometimes, replying when is just another way of saying I'm ready for you. For this, for whatever we build together. We stood on that terrace, the cultural center alive with voices behind us, and I finally understood. This was what belonging felt like. Not fitting into someone else's space, but creating room for everyone to be fully themselves, including me. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.